Good morning. Welcome to the Bloom Show. This is Sahid, your host. The Bloom Show is brought to you by New Bloom Media and New Bloom Solutions. This show is a special episode. In this whole week, we've been doing Blooming Alerts tariff series, and we've been bringing experts and professionals, specialists throughout all sectors of the industry, from supermarket to Ecuador representatives, Colombian representatives, IFPA importer representatives, and much more. So we do have a few episodes in the past, and now we're working on these today. And today we have the privilege of having representatives from International Floral Produce Association, IFPA, two very important representatives. Actually, one we're speaking to from DC, maybe the other one we are, but I'll find that out today. But today we have Rebeckah Adcock, VP of U.S. Government Relations for IFPA, and John Hollay, Director of Government Relations. John Hollay for Director of Government Relations for IFPA. And it's important to be speaking to IFPA and also to professionals and experts that have contact with the government to understand what we're going through. Again, this show is for the flower industry, by the floral industry. Its intention is to connect us all through information and through networking and connecting with your peers and getting to learn their stories and giving our industry a voice. We do encourage you, one, to subscribe, of course, and press the alert key not to miss the other episodes that are coming soon. Representative from Holland, the logistics representative, and a few more, and Charlie Hall on Monday. But what good is this information if you keep it to yourself? So I truly ask, and we truly ask for you to share it with your customers, share it with your employees, share it with some associations you're a part of. But sharing information is powerful because it unites us, it creates empathy, and it allows us to understand what we're all going through together. So without further ado, I'd like to invite, and please allow me to invite, Rebeckah Adcock and John Hollay onto the show to speak more about what IFPA is doing and how we are all in this together. Thank you.
The bloom, showing if they connect and bloom. The bloom, showing if they connect and bloom.
Good morning, John and Rebeckah. How are you doing today?
Good morning. How are you?
Very well. Thank you for joining. Thank you so much for joining. It's really important to do what we're doing, and I understand you're all very busy. So again, thank you in advance for your time, and thank you to IFPA for allowing us your presence.
Happy to be here.
Thank you so much. So let's jump right into it. Or can you briefly, starting with you, Rebeckah, share what you do for IFPA and who are you?
Well, thank you so much for inviting John and I and being here. We're part of the U.S.-based team that interacts, as our titles may suggest, with the U.S. government on all things international and domestic relating to fresh produce and florals. We are interacting daily with the administration, with Congress, certainly with the other influencers and policymakers, those in the food and agricultural industry based in the U.S. and also heavily weighted on the North American continent. As we all know, there's a lot of trade and a tremendous amount of focus on the North American continent right now. So John and I work in those spaces, and I lead a team of, I think, 5 people, 6 people now, if we count someone out on maternity leave, who are working on behalf of the industry in the connections with the U.S. government specifically.
Amazing. And how about yourself, John?
Yeah, so I, again, work with Rebeckah on the government relations team. Most of my work is focused on business-related issues for a lot of our produce and floral members. A lot of my time is taken up by labor issues, which continue to be a major challenge, but also working on supply chain issues, taxes, infrastructure, other things that are important to making sure business can operate in the U.S. and around the world.
Fantastic. Thank you for sharing. And again, thank you for being here. So let's jump into a question, and please, we're very casual here, so you can catch, anybody could answer it. But what is IFPA's current stance on concerns regarding the proposed U.S. flower tariff, and not proposed at this point. It's implemented. So what's your stance on that?
Yeah, so IFPA has been very active. Hopefully your viewers and listeners have seen some of our activity in certainly the trade press relating to florals in the produce sector. It came out quite early, actually, respectfully disagreeing with the course that the administration had planned on suggesting they were going to take in February. We said we understood the desire to have more favorable trade agreements for U.S. purposes, and we encouraged them to work through those trade processes. We certainly respected the focus and effort on, handling their domestic economy and improving the conditions for U.S. growers and U.S. production for those products. And those that we represent here in the U.S. We have the opinion that every country that can produce something in its country should do so. Yep. And we have recommended things that we thought would be a better use of the government's efforts in trying to empower those domestic intentions. Regulatory reform. John will talk soon about labor, how we can really empower and create a more stable labor force for the U.S. Growers, and dealing again with trade through trade agreements. We reinforced that right before the tariffs went into place with a more detailed correspondence that I think was picked up with quite a few press outlets that really articulated and expressed our position. The one thing that I do want to give the administration credit for is they have been on receiving our information and our concerns well. So we have a collaborative relationship there. They're asking for us to share data as we see consequences to the tariffs. And so we are, collecting that from our members as we speak. Some things are taking a bit of time, but we are, in a constant dialogue where we can be to try to demonstrate the concerns that we have about tariffs and their impacts, and make sure that those things are known so that can be part of the decision making for the administration.
Thank you. And what's interesting is you're seeing as IFPA, not just flowers, because this is a show dedicated within flowers, but you're seeing the whole scope of it.
Everything. The movement of basically the most perishable products that are out there. We represent the floral industry. We represent fresh fruits, vegetables, tree nuts, and those are as we know, some of the most challenging products to move around the globe, certainly to move across borders, because of the nature of what they are, how they're grown, and how quickly, they have to get where they are in order to be enjoyed by their customers. Yeah. So a lot at stake. We certainly see a tremendous flow from certain parts of the world into the U.S. And we've seen a bit of relief in keeping the U.S., Canada, Mexico trade agreement in place for those on the North American continent. But for those that are not in those three countries, the tariffs are in full effect, and they are truly beginning to be felt.
Is there yesterday we had Rodrigo Leyva. You might be familiar with him. He's worked with IFPA before, and Christine Bolt. And there was a kind of a talk of maybe, how do you say, taking flowers off of that list, right? Because you can't really grow it here in the U.S. It's not possible. 80% comes in. We saw during COVID a health benefit, mental health benefit. Is there a possibility of that happening? Is there a slim chance?
So part of our ask to the administration has been to exempt our fresh products that we represent, to exempt them from the tariffs. We and many other food and agricultural products are making those arguments to the administration, both for the production, both for our industry, and also for consumers, because we know that the cost will ultimately be borne by them, and we know that they may choose not to then purchase our products, and getting those customers back after price spikes is a challenge, and it truly shifts the supply chain and causes a lot of chaos and cost in the system. So yes, we are asking and have made the case for exemptions. I will tell you that the administration is taking a fairly hard line at granting exemptions for most any products at this time. They are still in posture of believing that the best, I'm not asking people to agree with this, but their posture is that they believe that keeping as many items as possible within the tariff universe, including some that we don't, necessarily grow robustly here in the U.S., is the best leverage and negotiating tool to get the tariffs from other countries down. Recall, this is a reciprocal tariff scheme.
Yeah.
So the U.S. position is that we are taxing, tariffing other countries because they are taxing and tariffing us.
Gotcha. Thank you for sharing. So let's go with John here and talk more about labor. Even before tariffs, U.S. growers and floral companies were facing labor changes. How do you see labor issues compounding with increased costs and tariffs-related pressures?
Yeah, so it's a great question. It's certainly something that's been on the mind of a lot of the folks that I've been talking to. For years, IFPA and even the organizations that merged to form it have really been fighting a battle in the United States that is the same kind of globally. How do you get an affordable, reliable, and predictable workforce? And I think what you see with the tariffs coming into play is that only creates more uncertainty. So if this is going to be a long-term transformation of where global production is going to be, then the labor markets are going to have to adjust. And so I think that's just an additional pressure, but that's long-term. Today, we still are facing a lot of the challenges here in the US of the cost of getting labor, the availability of labor, the affordability of labor. And I don't think that there's anything that we've seen coming out of the administration or the Congress so far this year that has changed the dynamic on that. And so we're continuing to ask for a lot of the reforms that we've sought in years past, because this is a long-term issue that's been ignored. So the tariffs certainly compound the problem, but it's one that's existed for a long time.
Thank you for sharing. Rebeckah, do you have anything to say on that?
John nails it. We have been working on trying to improve how labor, in particular, willing and secure foreign labor comes into this country to more robustly support the production of agricultural products in this country for decades. And we have not been able to make the progress needed. We have warned of the looming crisis that we are now desperately seeing on the farm. It is the number one limiting factor for U.S. production. We hear very frequently of people saying, we didn't pull all of the product in from the farm because we didn't have enough labor to get in time. And so it is definitely a reason why, if we're talking about improving and uplifting the prosperity for American production, it is absolutely topic number one that the administration and certainly Congress could deal with, take steps to improve.
And I'll just add to that is that it's so vital to making sure that we can help the president accomplish his economic goals. If we're going to be able to create the amount of food that's necessary, we've got to have the workforce that's going to be able to do that. And I'll add, it's specifically important for the floral industry. A lot of the floral products that are grown in the U.S. are grown in greenhouses. They're grown year round. They don't have access currently to the labor solutions that other folks in agriculture have. And so if we're going to take on the burden of growing these plants, we've got to have access to workers and a labor source that can meet those needs. So it's just absolutely vitally important.
Thank you for sharing. So the thought that the local U.S. growers can make up the lost imports or the price, that's not very accurate, correct? Because it is more expensive labor, land, et cetera. Can you speak a little bit on that?
Yes, well, and I can. And, the answer to that is mixed. The answer to that is we don't know exactly how much American agriculture can make up. And it's going to be very product dependent. like other parts of agriculture, the row crops, the livestock sector, the specialty crop sector, the floral sector most certainly has lost production in the U.S.
Yeah.
Multiple reasons for that. And some of that is because it is cheaper to produce items and some of these products in other parts of the world where it is equally attractive to do so. And so that really is what we have tried to message to the administration, to let them know that some of the reasons why people have chosen to no longer produce here and perhaps either go out of business because their children maybe weren't interested, or felt like they were competed out of business, or they moved to another country to do business, is because of the regulatory choices and the lack of labor and many of the things that the government does have a level of control over, that they can adjust regulatory burden. They can help provide a better, more stable and willing and safe labor supply. Those are things the federal government controls, and they have controlled them to the detriment of agriculture for decades. So if we can unravel some of those things, we have the ability to see if some production can be picked up. Unfortunately, some of the production that has gone offline over the past few decades has grown houses and has gone to other purposes. So there is a land capacity challenge. That land can be much more expensive than it was, and not necessarily within the realm of what is tremendously affordable for agriculture. But we know that are limits to growing seasons, to cycles, and to growing regions. And so there are some products that we know, even if we can make some progress and grow more here, we know there are some things that will be a very limited ability to expand for a host of reasons.
Thank you for sharing. Another question is, how could these tariffs impact trade relationships, cost structure, and U.S. floral businesses in both short and long term? And I guess the real heart of the question is, how is it going to impact supermarket pricing for the consumer?
Yeah, well, we have every reason to believe that when it costs more to move a product, those costs get passed through the system, and ultimately some portion of that cost will get passed to the consumer. We are in the early days of the movements of those products. So depending on when they were placed on ships or airplanes, it's going to determine, at what level and where they're coming from when they arrive in the U.S., how and when and whether a tariff applies immediately. And then you'll have to play it out through the system, through the supply chain, through logistics. Yeah. Onto the buyers and then ultimately the consumers. So we don't have hard numbers on what those price increases will look like. We don't know how all the different players will treat, whether they will try to absorb any of those costs, whether they will pass them all along objectively. I think it's fair to say we're not expecting, and I'm just picking a number out of the air, if a country had an 18% tariff based on the new reciprocals, we would not expect that to be an automatic 18% price increase to the consumer, but some fraction thereof. And it could depend on the product, could depend on how long it was in transit, all the variables that ultimately determine the cost. But we have made very clear that we expect things to cost more. And it's very interesting, and we're very cognizant that, we're going into the Easter season for those who celebrate, and then onto Mother's Day, at least on the North American continent. And those are huge holidays here in the U.S. And in Canada. And, the tremendous seasons for the floral industry. So I think we'll determine a lot about consumer behavior when we figure out, kind of what the results are there.
And just to add to what Rebeckah said, I think our floral members and the industry writ large, has some additional concerns with some of the other pieces that go into the flowers that people buy, the small plastic stems, the pots, all those things that don't necessarily get thought about and are all an important part of the equation because they draw products from multiple places. And so I think for floral, there is that added dynamic. And then I think the other challenge, and we certainly saw this in the past with COVID, is that there is pressure, particularly on retail sales in supermarkets. When there is economic pressure, there is pressure on floral purchases. And so that's something that we have got to keep an eye on, is making sure that flowers are front and center in those locations. So.
Very, very well said. Thank you for sharing that. Very, very well said. Final question for John and yourself as well, Rebeckah, is, are there any labor policy shift programs, advocacy efforts that IFPA is currently supporting that may impact floral companies directly?
Yeah, so we're leaving no stone unturned. It's been almost 40 years, 39 years exactly, since Congress has passed legislation. So we have really put forth an effort that attempts to get at every possible solution. So that includes legislative, looking at piecemeal solutions to issues. One of the things that is the biggest challenge for labor users in the U.S. is if you can use the H-2A program, you can't afford the H-2A program. Mm-hmm. So getting a cap on those wages. And if you can't access the program, which, as I mentioned, so many of our floral members can't, making sure that we can open up doors to the program. So we're looking at the appropriations process, which is a way to get at a possible solution there. There's also some standalone legislation, one getting at the adverse effect wage rate. HR 1624 is legislation that we are supporting that gets at that. We anticipate more legislation to come that gets at those broader access issues. Mm-hmm. And then we're also working with the Trump administration to look at pulling back some of the Biden regulations that were so hurtful to users of the H-2A program, and some of the more general labor regulations that they put forth that made it more difficult to do business. So we've got a lot of things that we're working on. And then we still have an outstanding lawsuit against the Biden Department of Labor on a regulation that they put out, which needs to be resolved, and we're certainly hopeful that it would be. So we've got a lot of irons in the fire, and we just need to make sure that Congress responds. And I think, the atmosphere that we find ourselves in, I think members of Congress are going to be looking for some of these labor solutions as we go forward.
Rebeckah, any thoughts there?
John nailed it. It's a all of the above approach. We're truly a critical mass for many of our producers and growers on labor issues. Again, it is their number one most limiting and concern, and certainly expense. We have upwards of some members saying that as much as 90% of their profitability is taken up by labor, the costs that they can't control. For the rest of the country, it's probably somewhere around 50+%. It is a tremendous expense. People are taking, care of their workers. They pay them well, but they need a predictable and logical and legal option and solution. And that's what we're working with Congress and the administration to do.
Thank you for sharing. And as you said, many irons in the fire, many. So congratulations and keep up the good work. So final question is, what advice would you give floral companies, supermarkets, growers, importers, distributors looking to prepare or to have their voices heard right now? So how can they help in moving this along?
Yes. Well, for those that have U.S. presence, they should absolutely make contact with their members of Congress, senators, and representatives to let them know and understand the consequences to their business from the tariffs, from labor, from the many topics that we talk about in the agricultural space, for which floral is robustly included. And if for those that are not in the U.S. or do not have a U.S. presence, but are in other countries, now is the time to make the case to your countries, to speak to your government where they are receptive, and let them know that this is a tremendous consequence to your business, and encourage them, again, because of the nature of these tariffs being at least perceived reciprocal. If there's ways that their government can work with the U.S. to try to find a path forward to reduce the tariffs, hopefully on both sides, to find benefit there, the faster we can get through this. In the meantime, leveraging the expertise of your customs professionals that you rely on in your normal course of order. Tariffs are not new. Most of our industry has to deal with them at some small scale in some markets. And to leverage that expertise to try to understand what the rules are so you can create as much consistency and stability in an otherwise chaotic system as possible, and plan for this. It could relieve for certain countries. If things could relieve themselves fairly quickly, we don't know. For others, it could linger for a substantial amount of time. Due to things that have nothing to do with floral or agriculture, much larger political issues. So I want people to continue to prepare and not assume this is going away quickly. So take the steps that you need in your business to prepare for these uncertain times that could extend.
Thank you for sharing, John.
I think Rebeckah said all the right things, and the only thing I would add and highlight is keep talking to each other, right? This is so important. You and I were talking on before we started about the importance of communication in the industry, not just kind of with with the people that are at that same level that you are, but up and down the supply chain. That's something that IFPA does day in, day out. And I think it's really good advice that it's something that we all should be doing in this time of uncertainty, because we've got a lot more in common, I think, than we tend to realize sometimes. So all those things, engage with your members of Congress, your elected officials, and engage with each other.
Very well said.
And one last thing, I'd want to say that IFPA does have a tariff resources page. So if you go to International Fresh Produce, freshproduce.com, and type in tariff resources, we are maintaining a webpage there with the most accurate information, either about impacts to our industry, data about our industry, what we know about the tariffs, resources from the U.S. government. We're trying to start a bit of a option that will allow people to bring us feedback, so we can receive what the impacts are and start tracking that, sharing that with our, with the administration to start telling the story as accurately as possible. So please, if you're an IFPA member here listening, do check out that website and keep checking back, because it is updated frequently.
Great insight. It's only available to members, correct?
I believe, I think their basic information is available publicly. There will be some information that will be behind a member wall.
Okay, fantastic. But that's very important information. Thank you for making people aware, and gives them a reason to become a member of IFPA as well. Great organization. So John and Rebeckah, thank you so much for your time. I know you're, as I said, extremely busy. I promised to take 15 minutes of your time, but took 27. So I do want to thank you for that. Appreciate your time, and anything we could do to support to get the message out, please consider us an ally, and we are here to help.
Thank you so much, Sahid.
Thank you so much.
Take care. Have a great day.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye. So great show as always, and it's very, very important to see the other aspect of what is happening behind the scenes, right? So just like John had said, connecting to each other and sharing information is extremely imperative in these times. So again, thank you to IFPA, thank you to John, thank you to Rebeckah for joining, because they're taking their time to truly share with us what they're going through, what they're doing, and also deeper issues like labor issues that are not going away yet and have been here, but we're working behind the scenes. They're doing things to get it done. And something I was talking to John even earlier was that IFPAs are doing things, SAF are doing things, IFPA are doing things, and I might be missing others. It's important that we also do them together. So as a community, I ask everybody to please continue to share. Share this information with your community. Share this information with your partners, because again, with information comes unity. With information comes empathy. Oh, here's Sylvie. Sorry, Sylvie, I just caught you. Let's see. Sylvie says, thanks for the valuable insight. What is your stance? Oh, gosh. John, are you still there? What is your sense of disregard U.S. government by existing unilateral buyback? Bringing John in. John, I know you're hanging out. How are you? You're still.
I'm doing well.
So I have a question that just came in. Do you mind answering it?
I can try. Sure, why not? Let's see what we got here. I'm trying to read and watch.
Let's see. Thanks for valuable insight. What is your stance on the complete disregard by a U.S. administration, answer it as you can, of all the existing unilateral and bilateral trade agreements? Sorry, might be too sensitive. I'm not based in the U.S., but in EU. So can you answer that?
Sylvie, it's a great question, and I appreciate even your consideration that it might be too sensitive. It's not that it's too sensitive. I think it's an observation on how the current administration is operating. I think as my colleague Rebeckah said earlier, the president and this administration is committed to their tariff agenda because they believe that the U.S. has been the victim of a tariff agenda by others in the global community. So I will leave it at that. As Rebeckah said, it's not our explanation. It is their explanation. I will leave it at that. But Sylvia, I certainly appreciate the thought, the sentiment, and the acknowledgement of the challenge of the question.
John, and I appreciate you and taking on the challenge. So I really appreciate it. Sorry to put you in the spot, but thought it was important to answer all the questions that our audience are asking. But thank you again, John, for your time.
Thank you.
Take care. I won't do it again, I promise. Take care, John. So again, thank you to John for answering as best as he could, respectfully, and we appreciate that. And thank you, Sylvie. I know you've been watching the past series. So again, everybody, please feel free to share. Very easy. How do you do that? Copy the URL, share it, right? Copy, paste it somewhere, and share it. Feel free to share. Feel free to chime in. Feel free to reach out and connect. Connect at New Bloom Solutions. If there's any other guests you think are important for us to cover or any follow-up questions that you may have, you could always put it in the comments. And don't forget to subscribe, like, and comment, subscribe, like, and share. Take care.
Dark blue, showing a fake connect and bloom. Dark blue, showing a fake connect and bloom. Dark blue, showing a fake connect and bloom. Dark blue, showing a fake connect and bloom.